tonight.
Yeah.
As we get ready for the coming battle against the forces of destruction, I take a huge pleasure in introducing to you a real American hero, someone who always fights the good fight, no matter what the personal consequences. A brave voice of reason, the conscience of the Congress. His fight is always for us, the 99%. Standing up for the environment, for veterans, for working families, for poor, for children, and the elderly. It's all in a day's work for Senator Bernie Sanders. During his 24 years in Congress, he has led the fight for improved veterans care and benefits, for the Affordable Care Act, for energy efficiency and sustainability, and for the middle class. He has fought valiantly against the concentration of wealth and power by the corrupt and selfish. As a Vietnam veteran and a retired letter carrier, I love Bernie. It is with great admiration for Senator Sanders that I tell you he authored 2 bills, Senate Bill 316, the Postal Service Protection Act, and Senate Bill 1950, which is a comprehensive veterans bill. These 2 bills, if passed, will drag 2 essential institutions, the Postal Service and the VA, kicking and screaming into the 21st century. As the largest employer of veterans in America, the Postal Service is the perfect place for a new veteran to continue serving his or her country. The skills, commitment, and drive learned in military service are immediately transferable to a postal employee. Senator Sanders' unwavering support for those 2 institutions and for working people everywhere will help get us all through these distressing times. And to show you how much letter carriers love Senator Sanders, I was allowed out of the House tonight with a red t-shirt. Unheard of in my house. But it was covered with Bernie's name, so I was allowed to do it. Please join me in welcoming a true working class hero, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
Well, thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. As chairman of the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, I'm proud to tell you that we actually got legislation through the United States Congress. And I want to thank Amy Wright for helping to organize this event. Amy, thank you. Ann Wright, thank you very much, Ann, for all of you. The New Hampshire Democratic Party Chair, Ray Buckley. Ray, thank you for your work. I think I don't have to tell all of you that it is absolutely imperative that we bring Jeanne Shaheen back to the United States. Jeanne and I work together on a number of issues, and she is doing a terrific job. And obviously you have a very strong House delegation as well, and we look forward to seeing Governor Hassan re-elected as well. So thank you all very much. Let me begin by thanking all of you, and I mean this sincerely. Very often, as I go around the country or when I'm in Vermont, I talk about the need for a political revolution. And touched on the issue a moment ago as to why we need a political revolution. In this coming election, it is projected that 60% of the American people are not going to vote. And if you drill down a little bit, it turns out that about 70 to 80% of low-income workers will not vote. 75, 80% of young people will not vote. Meanwhile, while some of the most vulnerable people in this country are totally alienated from the political process, are not voting, are not participating, there is another reality that's taking place. And that is the Koch brothers and other billionaires are prepared to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in New Hampshire, all over this country, to elect candidates who are pledged to defend the interest of the wealthy and the powerful. So the dynamic of American politics right now is that millions of people have given up on the political process. A recent poll suggested that 63% of the American people could not name the parties that control the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. Okay? That's where we're at. Most people don't know who their members of Congress are. What a political revolution means is that ordinary people, working people, low-income people, understand the significance of politics and government for their lives. And if we can achieve that, if we did nothing more in the next 5 or 6 weeks, but raise the voter turnout in November's election from 40% to 50%, not only would the Republicans not gain control of the Senate, they would lose control of the House. And it seems to me that in a democratic society, asking 50% of the American people to come out to vote should not be a very heavy lift. So that is our job. And there are a lot of reasons, as you all know, why people don't vote. Why people don't know, why people don't care anymore, why people have given up. Politically, this is a very demoralized society right now. But I will absolutely assure you that the Koch brothers and their friends do understand, do care, and are actively involved. And our job, which is not a simple job, and what I want to thank all of you for, the work you do is not sexy. You're not usually in the front pages of the papers. But by getting on the phones, by doing the mailings, by knocking on doors, you are doing exactly what millions of Americans have got to do. You are helping to create and build a grassroots political movement. So I thank you all very much for what you're doing. Sometimes I get a little distressed looking at the media and how media portrays politics. I think for a lot of media out there, national media, politics is like a game. It's like, you know, the Patriots versus the Redskins. Who's going to win? Who made a mistake? Who's doing well in the polls? I want to tell you right now, very as clearly as I can, what this election is about and what is going on in Washington. And I'm going to do that in the following way. I am going to read you from a document of the Libertarian Party of 1980, which featured David Koch as their vice presidential candidate and as the guy who funded that party. Now, why is that relevant? It is relevant because you should know what the second wealthiest family in America stands for, what their vision is for America. So when we talk about why we are involved in the political process, I want you to hear. The media doesn't talk about this too much. But what I'm going to read you is the platform that Koch ran on, and to the best of my knowledge, his views have not changed. This is their vision for America. Please listen up. Quote, I'm reading right from their platform. We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. End of quote. Now, what that means in English, this is what it means. And this is 1980. And what is particularly scary is when Koch ran for vice president, They got 1% of the vote. But what they have done in the last 34 years is expend billions of dollars to move the Republican Party from what was once a center-right party to a right-wing extremist party. What this platform, what this plank talks about is eliminating all campaign finance reform. As all of you know, Citizens United will go down in history as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever. And we've got to overturn Citizens United. But what the Koch brothers believe, and what the head of the Republican Party believes now, Citizens United, brothers and sisters, did not go far enough. Because now all that the Koch brothers and the other billionaires can do is put independent expenditures. What they want to do by eliminating all campaign finance law is have a situation where a handful of billionaires will be able to contribute directly to a candidate. In other words, somebody wants to run for the Senate from New Hampshire. Here you are, here's your check for $50 million. There is your speechwriter, here is your platform, here is your media consultant. You work for me, and here is your check. That is their vision for the future of American democracy. Ordinary people, I quote, "We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid programs," end of quote. Not talking about cuts, they want to end those programs. Have they succeeded? No. But if you look at the Ryan budget in the U.S. House, what you'll find is they have now taken the view that we should end Medicare as we know it and transform it into a voucher program. What does that mean? It means that if they had their way, if you are 70 years of age and your doctor diagnoses you with cancer, you will be given a check for $8,000 to go out to a private insurance company to get the insurance that you need. That's what it means. And that will last you at least one day. And I want you to think through what that really means. What do you think for an elderly person who can come down with one or another serious illness? What is $8,000 going to do? That's their vision. In terms of Medicaid, which is the health insurance program for the poor, they have proposed massive cuts, and as you know, in many Republican states around the country, they refuse to implement the provision in the Affordable Care Act, which will greatly expand Medicaid to millions and millions of lower income people. All right? Then they say, listen up, "We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, virtually bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system." Now, have they succeeded in doing that? No. But under Bush, you will all remember there was an effort to privatize Social Security. I worked very hard not only on veterans issues and postal issues. A couple of years ago, you all may remember these guys getting up on the television talking about entitlement reform. You remember that? It means cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Out of a caucus called the Defending Social Security Caucus, we reached out to millions of seniors, to veterans, to women's groups, to disability groups, to the unions, and we beat them back. But this idea of privatizing Social Security remains very, very high on their agenda. This is what the Koch brothers would like to see happen. We heard about the Postal Service. They say, quote, "We propose the abolition of the governmental Postal Service." Gone, privatized. Quote, "We advocate the complete separation of education and state. Government schools lead to the indoctrination of children and interfere with the free choice of individuals. In English, the end of public education." Quote, "We support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency." Quote, Let me read you this one, because this is really quite extraordinary, and I want you to see how far these guys are going. Quote, "We oppose all government welfare, relief projects, and aid to the poor programs. All these government programs are privacy-invading, paternalistic, demeaning, and inefficient. The proper source of help for such persons is the voluntary efforts of private groups and individuals." End of quote. You know what that means in English? Unemployment insurance, gone. Head Start, gone. Nutrition programs, gone. Federal aid to education, gone. In other words, their vision of America is where you have a handful of billionaire families, and by the way, they also advocate here, not surprisingly, more tax breaks for the rich. What their vision of America is to do away with every major piece of legislation passed since the 1930s, which protect working families, the elderly, and the poor. And if you have no food and you are hungry, there's not going to be a food stamp program for you. Maybe some church, maybe some private charity will throw you a few bucks, maybe. And if you're old and you're sick, maybe somebody will help you. But you have no rights. Your country will be run by an oligarchy of billionaire families. Now, I mention this all because I think people think, well, you know, politics is a game, and what's the latest poll? What we are dealing with is deadly serious. Deadly serious. This is not an argument about how much we put into education. Republicans more conservative, Democrats, independents want more. This is a debate about the absolute future of America and the rights of the American people. Let me say a few words about where we are as a nation. Because again, I think that we don't have the kind of serious discussion that we should be having in America. Too much of our debate, so-called debate, is trivial. Too much is gotcha stuff. Too much is ugly 30-second ads. And here's the good news. And this will surprise you, but it is true. On virtually every major issue, economic issue, that I will discuss, every one of you in this room is part of a significant majority of the American people. Sometimes what the media tries to say is, well, there's a blue state and then there's a red state. We're all divided. Well, on issues we are. On issues like guns and gay marriage and abortion and all that, there are divisions in this country. But the truth of the matter is, on economic issues, the vast majority of the American people are united. You talk about issues like Citizens United and whether billionaires should be able to buy elections. Do you know what progressives and moderates and conservatives say? They say in very large numbers, that is not what American democracy is about. You ask the American people, should the millionaires and the wealthiest people in this country who are doing phenomenally well, should they be asked to pay more in taxes? You know what the American people say overwhelmingly? Yes, they should. You ask the American people, do you think the federal government should be actively involved in creating the millions of jobs we desperately need, rebuilding our infrastructure, etc.? You know what the American people say? Yes, we should. You ask the American people about global warming, climate change. Numbers may not be as high, but a strong majority believe that climate change is real and the government should be aggressive in transforming our energy system. So what ends up happening, the Republicans have a serious problem in that if they were to put ads on television, honestly talking about what they believe and say, you know, vote for this candidate who wants to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and give huge tax breaks to billionaires. We appreciate your support. Well, they probably could get 5%, maybe. So they have got to think very, very hard. How do you win elections? Well, you change the subject. That's what you do. And that is essentially what they do, and they do it brilliantly. They poll, and they do focus groups, and they finally come up with issues that can divide the American people, and that is what they focus on. So their job is to divide the American people. Our job is to bring the American people together so that we can rebuild our crumbling middle class, so that we can expand Social Security, work for all of the people and not just the 1%. That's what we've got to do. Take this opportunity, I have a captive audience here, to bore you for a moment with some facts, because it's important that we understand what's going on. The American people, including a whole lot of people in the Tea Party movement, they are angry. A lot of anger out there. And you know what? Working people have the right to be angry. The problem is, a whole lot of people are angry for the wrong reasons at the wrong people. And our job is to get them angry at the right people for the right reasons. Let me just go over a few facts. All of you are aware that technology has exploded in the last number of decades. You got robotics in factories, we have all kinds of space-age technology, all kinds of beautiful computer technology. One would think that in a rational world, if an employer gave an employee a new tool that made him or her 30% more productive, that's good. And that would mean that that employee would either be making 30% more or maybe working fewer hours. That is precisely what is not happening in American society today. Since 1999, the typical middle-class family, that is that family right in the middle of the economy, half above, half below, that family has seen its income go down by more than $5,000 after adjusting for inflation. That's why people are angry. They're working longer hours for lower wages, worried about their kids, and they are going nowhere in a hurry. Listen to this. Typical male workers, and a lot of these folks are these, middle-class white guys, they're angry. Here's why they're angry. Typical male workers made $283 less last year than that worker made 44 years ago in inflation accounted for dollars. How's that? The whole world changes. We were told the global economy was going to improve the standard of living. You got all this technology out there, and that guy right in the middle of the American economy is making $283 less than 44 years ago. Typical female workers earned $1,700 less last year than she earned in 2007. Now, this is an important point too. Our Republican friends are telling us the economy is not in good shape. They're right, it is not in good shape. But what they conveniently forget to tell us is how the economy was when Obama took office. And our job is to make sure that they and the American people do not forget. All right? Remember back to those dark days in 2008 when Bush left and Obama came in. We were losing, it's an unimaginable number, 700,000 jobs a month. And people say job growth now is not what it should be. They're right. Job growth now is meager. It is not where it should be. But it is a hell of a lot better than losing 700,000 jobs a month. And again, we as Americans have kind of short memories. But all of you remember, again, when Obama came into office, and Ben Bernanke recently made this point. Not only the American financial system, but the world's financial system was on the brink of collapse. We were not so far away where people would stick their card into an ATM machine and nothing would happen. I have, and we'll talk about, a lot of problems with Wall Street today, but nobody can deny that the economy and our financial system is a lot better than it was. Our Republican friends like to talk about deficits, and they're great concerns about the deficit. Well, in Bush's last year, we had a $1.4 trillion deficit. We have lowered that by more than 50%. So, no debate that the economy today is stronger, but nobody here is satisfied in any way with where the economy is. And the reason for that is that real unemployment is not 6.1%. The government issues a number of different statistics, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And one of them is looking at the official unemployment rate, with 6.1. If you include people who have given up looking for work and hire a place there, but media forgot to talk about African American youth unemployment, which today is at 33%. And here's something. We talk about why the American people are so stressed out. Today, this is, it's just to me, I keep repeating these facts and they blow me away. Half of the American people have less than $10,000 in their savings accounts. You know what that means? That means you are an automobile accident, you are an illness, you are a divorce away from financial disaster. So we are living in a very stressed out society where people are scared to death about what happens to them in terms of healthcare, what happens to them in terms of their jobs, what happens to their kids. And it's not just that people are worrying about themselves. They're saying, is my kid going to get a decent job? Is my kid going to be able to afford to go to college? And if my kid graduates college, what is she or he going to be doing with a $30,000 or a $50,000 debt? Now, in the midst of all of this, in the midst of the collapse of the American middle class, there is another reality that is taking place. And I hope and trust that everybody in this room understands it. You know, it's one thing if a hurricane or a tornado comes through a town and everybody is hit. What we are living in now is a very strange moment. Middle class disappearing. We have almost as many people living in poverty today as in the history of the United States of America. We have lost millions of decent paying manufacturing jobs because companies shut down in America and they're running to China, and they're running to Vietnam, and they're running to Mexico. And in the midst of all of that, there is another important reality. And that reality is that the people on top have literally never had it so good. We today have the most unequal distribution of wealth of any major country on earth. You know, we all think about the United Kingdom and their queens and lords and bishops, whatever they got there. They got all this stuff. You know, well, that's really a class-oriented society. Not America. Wrong. We have more inequality in terms of wealth than the UK does or any other major country. Today in America, the top 1% owns 37% of the wealth in America. Bottom 60% owns 1.7% of the wealth in America. So if America was represented by 100 people, and you had 100 slices of pizza, one guy would get 37 pieces, and 60 people would be sharing in 1.7 pieces of pizza. That is more inequality today than at any time since before the Great Depression in 1929. And we should not forget what happened in 1929. Today in America, we have one family, it's the Walton family that owns Walmart's, who are now worth about $148 billion. That is more wealth in that one family than the bottom 40% of the American people. Our friends, Charles and David Koch, are very upset about the socialistic and tyrannical economic policies of the Obama administration. And that is why they have increased their wealth by $1 billion a month. $1 billion a month since Obama came to office. Now imagine how they would do under the Republicans, I don't know. But it seems to me $1 billion a month increase in your wealth is not too shabby. Now, when we talk about income, that's what we make in a given year. And this again is why the American people are furious. Since the Wall Street crash, 95% of all new income has gone to top 1%. So the economists talk about GDP, that we grow at 2%, 4%, 5%, and that's important. But in a certain sense, it doesn't matter if all of the new income goes to the people on top. I know that in New Hampshire, and I know that in Vermont, great concern about education, making sure we have quality, decent paid teachers. Last year, the top 25 hedge fund managers made more than $24 billion. That is enough to pay the full salaries of more than 425,000 public school teachers. 25 hedge fund managers made as much money as 425,000 public school teachers. Now, our billionaire friends in large corporations moan and groan about taxes. In 1952, corporations contributed about 32% of all of the revenue that came in to the federal government. Today, that number is less than 10%. 1 out of 4 major corporations in America, including companies like General Electric and Verizon, pays 0 in a given year in federal income tax. We are losing about $100 billion a year because wealthy people and corporations are stashing their money in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda in order to avoid paying U.S. taxes. And those are the realities of what's going on in America today. Simply stated, the great middle class, and I should tell you, my father came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. That's the story of many of your families. Came here, he never made a lot of money. But he was able to send his 2 sons to college. That was a pretty big deal, and he was a very proud American. But that middle class, where people who worked hard could provide for their kids, see their kids do better than them, that middle class today is very much in jeopardy. And it may well be that our kids, for the first time in the modern history of America, will have a lower standard of living than we do. That is the reality of where we are today. Almost more people living in poverty than ever before. The highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, and massive wealth and income inequality. Now, when I talk about wealth and income inequality, I focus on that issue for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a moral issue. You know, a lot of our Republican friends talk about morality. Well, let's talk about morality. Are we satisfied as a nation to be living in a society which has seen a proliferation, a huge increase in the number of millionaires and billionaires, at the same time as we have over 1 million children in this country who are homeless? I don't believe that most Americans feel comfortable with that. So this issue of income and wealth inequality comes down to how much do they need? I mean, one would think that for the Koch brothers, 80 billion or 100 billion, whatever they're worth, might be enough to get you by for a few years. You might think so. But what you are dealing with is a new religion, and it's a religion of greed. And it is very much not radically different, people have written about this, than people who have alcohol problems or drug problems. They need more and more and more. And these guys need more and more and more. And they are prepared to destroy the middle class of this country and the working class of this country in order to get that. So this becomes a moral issue, but it is also an economic issue. Why is it an economic issue? Because when you live in a society where so few have so much and so many have so little, it is difficult to create the kinds of jobs that we need. Why is that? Because we have tens of millions of Americans today who have no money to spend, no disposable income. And if they are not buying products that our neighbors manufacture or sell, if they are not purchasing services that our neighbors work at, we are not going to create the jobs. There are only so many jobs that the rich can provide. The truth of the matter is, trickle-down economic theory is a fraud. And our job is to put money into the hands of working people. And not only because it is the right thing to do, because economically it's the right thing to do. When people have money, they're going to go out and spend that money. Mitt Romney both spent a little bit over $1 billion on their presidential campaigns. In the last year, the Koch brothers have seen their wealth increase by $12 billion, from 68 to $80 billion. Obama spent a little over $1 billion on his campaign. For these guys, they could spend $2 billion. They could spend $4 billion, and it is like you going out for a cup of coffee. And that is what they are doing right now. Not only the Koch brothers. You may remember, I know New Hampshire prides itself on having the first primary in the country. Wrong. Sheldon Adelson had the first primary in the country. Do you all remember that? Yes. A number of months ago, potential Republican candidates went to Sheldon and said, what do we have to do to win your primary and get hundreds of millions of dollars from you? And it was done behind closed doors, so we don't know what it was, but that's what it was. If you tell me what I want, I will give you money. You work for me. So you have income and wealth inequality as a moral issue, an economic issue, and a political issue. And I've tried to describe very briefly kind of where I see the country politically and economically, but now let me tell you what I think we should be doing, what we have got to do to turn this country about. And let me preface that by saying this. I believe, I'll tell you a story. I was up in Derby Line, which is right near the Canadian border, a few years ago. There was a meeting of veterans up there, and it was a young lady who had a video. And she showed a video of Franklin Delano Roosevelt speaking on December 8th, 1941. You all remember what that day was? That was the day the United States declared war against Japan. And I was thinking, what struck me at that moment, and you should see that video, what struck me is on that day, the United States was totally unprepared. Not only to fight in the East, but to fight in the West as well. And yet, within 2.5 years, for all intent and purposes, that war was won. The country mobilized, we built the military machine that we did, soldiers were beyond brave, extraordinary work, we won. So the point that I want to make is, yes, these are difficult times in America, but I hope very much that you do not become so dispirited, throw up your hand and say nothing can happen. It can happen. It can happen if we come together around a sensible agenda. And let me talk about what I think some of that agenda should be. Number one, every poll that's out, if you go up to the average person in Vermont or New Hampshire and say, what is the most important issue? What they will tell you is jobs and the economy. That's what they will tell you. Decent paying jobs. In my view, what we have got to do is develop a federal jobs program which creates millions of decent paying jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. In Vermont, and I suspect in your beautiful state and all over this country, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our older schools, our rail systems are way, way behind where they should be. There's a group called the American Society of Civil Engineers, and they estimate that we need to spend $3 trillion on rebuilding our infrastructure in order to get it up to par. $3 trillion. Coincidentally, $3 trillion is about the amount of money we spent on the war in Iraq, a war that we should never have gotten into. If we wanted to be conservative and just put $1 trillion into rebuilding our infrastructure, we could create about 13 million jobs, which is exactly what we should be doing. Furthermore, the issue is not just jobs, but it is decent paying jobs. All of you know that a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. We have got to raise the minimum wage to at least 10 cents. Thank you for being one of those people fighting to raise that minimum wage, as your members of the House are And then the third thing we have to do, which is a bit more controversial, is take a hard look at our trade policies. For the young people in this room, they may be shocked to know that there was once a time when you could walk into a department store and actually purchase products made in the United States of America and not in China. That's true. But over the last 15 years or so, we have lost some 60,000 factories in America. Not all of it attributed to trade, but a lot of it. And our demand has got to be to corporate America. If you want us to buy your products, how about starting to rebuild manufacturing in America and putting our people back to work? In terms of education, which is enormously important. 30 or so years ago, the United States led the world in terms of the percentage of our people who graduated college. We were number one. Anyone want to guess where we are today? We're in 12th place. Now, we live in a highly competitive global economy, and most of the good jobs are going to be high-skilled jobs. Now, how are we going to get those jobs if we don't have the best educated workforce in America? So starting from childcare, which in this country is a total disaster. You have working families. It used to be a time when there was one person in the family. Dad went out to work. Well, those days are long gone. Mom was out working too. And mom and dad both deserve to know that when they are out working, their kids are getting quality childcare at an affordable price. Every psychologist who studies the issue tells us the most important years of a human being's life are 0 to 3 in terms of emotional life and in terms of intellectual life. It is beyond belief that we have people today all over this country who are working with little kids who earn less than McDonald's workers do. So we need to pay attention to our children, create a national child care system, have well-trained and well-paid people taking care of our kids. And on the other end of the spectrum is the college situation. And again, I don't have to tell you this because you already know. There are hundreds of thousands of bright young people who can't afford to go to college now. They're not going. Think for a moment how stupid that is. Not just for the kids, but for the nation. To deny higher education to bright kids who can contribute so much. And then you have other kids coming out deeply in debt. I had a meeting a couple of months ago with some people, and there was a young woman who graduated medical school. She's practicing in Burlington, Vermont. Do you know what her debt is? $300,000. For the crime of going to medical school and becoming a primary care physician working with lower income people. $300,000 in debt. We have got to learn something from those countries in Scandinavia and Europe who understand that investing in children and in young people is investing in their future of their countries. About another issue of enormous consequence, and that is the social safety net and Social Security in particular. For many, many years, Republicans have been at war with Social Security. And you know why? Because the answer is that Social Security is the most successful federal program in the modern history in America. And if you believe that government cannot do anything and should not do anything, then you are very embarrassed by the success of Social Security. So when you hear folks get up there, and I got to tell you, this is common within the Republican Party, some Democrats as well. Got to be honest about that. But when you hear people get up and say, well, we need entitlement reform, we need to raise that retirement age to 70, or we need to cut back on benefits because Social Security is going broke, tell them that they're lying. Social Security is not going broke. Social Security has about $2.5 trillion in the trust fund right now, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 19 years. Social Security is not going broke. But if you want to extend Social Security, make it financially solvent for more than 19 years. And by the way, at the end of those 19 years, if Congress does nothing, which would be unthinkable, it will pay out 75, I guess it shouldn't say that. Very thinkable. Social Security would pay out 75% of all benefits. It means the trust fund disappears, money comes in, money goes out. What's the simple way, one simple way that we can solve the problem? The problem is right now, for those of you in this room who are worth it, you know, who earn $10 million a year, and I'm sure there are many of you, you know that you are paying into the Social Security Trust Fund the same amount as somebody who makes $117,000. When Obama first ran in 2008, as I reminded him many times, he had an idea that said, okay, we're going to lift the cap, and we don't have to even start at 117. We can start all the way up at 250. Lift that cap, Social Security will be solvent for decades, and you know what else we can do? We can expand, improve Social Security benefits, and that's what we should do. The argument that they also tell you is that Social Security, you know, we have a large deficit, a $17 trillion national debt. My God, it just hurts me, but we're going to have to cut Social Security. All of you know that's nonsense as well, because Social Security is paid for by the payroll tax. That's what you have paid into your whole life, and your employer has paid it. Social Security does not add to the deficit. So these guys lie a whole lot. And you got folks out there, I don't know if anyone knows who this guy Pete Peterson is. Anyone know who he is? Pete Peterson is a Wall Street billionaire. This man is obsessed with cutting Social Security. He has spent hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, a couple of years ago, he was up in, where was it, in Manchester here? What's the college there? St. Anselm's. Right, he was there with his big tour about the deficit, and I was there, and a whole lot of seniors were there, giving these guys a different point of view. But they are obsessed for a variety of reasons to cut or privatize Social Security. Let me say a word about health care, which is enormously important. I voted for the Affordable Care Act for a couple of reasons. Number one, I was able to get into it some $12 billion to significantly expand community health centers all over America. The result of that alone is that 4 million more Americans have access to health care. I was in Mississippi last month. There are counties in Mississippi where there are no doctors. There are no doctors. And if people get sick and they end up in the hospital and they don't have any health insurance, because Mississippi is one of the states, many, that has rejected the Affordable Care Act's expansion of Medicaid, you know what happens to them? The hospitals will take them and care for them. And when they leave, they get done for the bill. That's what happens. They get hounded to pay that bill, even if they don't have any money at all. So what do we do with health care? Well, I voted for the Affordable Care Act, and I think it has had some modest success. We have some 10 million more people today who have health insurance, nothing to sneeze at. I think we can argue, I think correctly, that as a result of the Affordable Care Act, the increase in healthcare spending in this country has gone down a little bit. It's still going up, but not as much as it used to, and that's important. But at the end of the day, in terms of healthcare, we have got to ask ourselves a few very, very simple questions. Number one, we need to understand, and I hope all of you do know, that the United States of America is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. You all know that? We are the only one. Many people don't know that. So we are kind of the odd guy out in terms of international health care. I live, well, we all do, we live near Canada. They have their system, single payer system. The UK has more of a socialized healthcare system. Germany, Scandinavia have different systems. But every one of those systems has two basic qualities. Number one, all people are covered as a right. And number two, private insurance companies play no role. So the issue that we have got to decide as a nation is, should all people have health care as a right? And I think they should. And the second issue that we have to decide is, how do you do that in a cost-effective way? Well, right now, as many of you know, we spend almost twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of other countries. So we're spending far more, and yet we have 40 million people without any health insurance, and many of you in this room have high premiums and high deductibles, correct? All right. And that's what we get for spending almost twice as much. My view is the United States should join the rest of the industrialized world. I believe in a Medicare for all, single-payer program. We've been very patient, and let me wrap this up by saying this. There is a lot of reasons to be distressed, to be dispirited, to be depressed about what's going on in our country economically and politically. But I ask you to remember the following. And my wife always makes me do this, because she says when I'm finished talking, people are totally depressed and they're suicidal. And I have to pass out tranquilizers or anti-suicide pills. I've learned that lesson. But she's right. Because I want you to think about this. If we were sitting here 30 years ago, and somebody were to say, you know, I think that maybe by the year 2008, the United States will have overcome a great deal of racism and elect an African-American president of the United States, and actually 4 years later, re-elect him by a good vote, people in this room would say, you are dreaming, you are crazy, it will never happen for another 100 years. It happened. And it happened because a lot of people all over this country fought hard, and the United States really came to terms with a lot of this racism and said, you know what, we're going to vote for somebody not based on the color of his skin, but based on his ideas. We should be very, very proud of that. 25 years ago or so, in the United States Senate, there were 2 women. Today, including your state, there are 20 women. And certainly your state has been a leader on that. A governor, 2 senators, and 2 members of the House. And what's important there, this is what's important, is we should not be voting for people because they are women or because they are men. We should be voting for them because we think that they are good candidates. And if we were sitting in this room 30 years ago saying, oh, I think the entire leadership of the state of New Hampshire would be women, you would have thought it'd be crazy. But it happened because the United States, again, not just New Hampshire, but all over this country, came to terms with a lot of its sexism. I can remember I used to be mayor of Burlington, Vermont. You all know where Burlington is. Yeah. And when I was mayor, we appointed the first, we did something so radical, oh my God, we appointed the first woman police officer. Oh boy, wasn't that radical. And now, you go to Washington, I think about half the police force is women, women in the military, women general. It is not a big deal anymore. Because now we look at people, now not to say that we don't have a lot of work to do on this issue, which is one of the reasons we have to pass this pay equity legislation. Pay the same amount as men for doing the same work. But even in that area, we have come a long way. People are now looking at what the candidate stands for rather than whether that candidate is a woman or a man. Think about disability issues. When I was growing up and some of you were growing up, when families had kids who were disabled, Down syndrome, or whatever, they were kind of institutionalized. It was an embarrassment to the family. They were kept in the dark. This country has come an enormous way in embracing and integrating people with disabilities into the mainstream. And we should be proud of it. And I could go on, but last and certainly not least, if we were sitting here 10 years ago, and we said, you know what, I think that gay marriage would be legal in conservative states in this country, you would have thought I was really crazy. But the issue of gay marriage is no longer an issue. You go out, and I do. I go to high schools all over Vermont and occasionally around the country. And you talk to kids about gay marriage and they say, why not? What is the issue? That's a non-issue. Their grandparents do not necessarily believe that, but that's what the kids think. And everybody knows that is where we are at right now. Huge transformation in overcoming discrimination against gays, against women, against African Americans, against people with disabilities, and on it goes. So we should be proud that as a nation, we have taken giant steps forward in making this a more humane and non-discriminatory society. Now, where we are right now, however, is a fight that is actually tougher than all of those fights. Because we are up against now a billionaire class which has unlimited resources, and they are prepared to do everything that they can to protect their interests. Can we beat them? Yeah, we can. And the reason we can beat them is there are a hell of a lot more of us than there are of them. And the us doesn't matter if 60% of the people don't vote. So what our job is, and I know that's exactly what you are doing, is educating people about the real issues facing this country. I understand, we live in a country, people have differences of opinion, but I think that if the average working person in this country knew who was funding the Tea Party, knew the agenda of the Republican Party would get very, very few votes from working families. So our job is to educate, our job is to organize, our job is to have the courage and to believe that in fact we can transform this country away from movement toward oligarchy and into a nation in which government works for all of us and not just the 1%, and into a nation in which all of our people have a decent standard of living. Thank you all very much. Was that the program? Or not? Does anyone have? Let's take a couple of questions. All right, woman way in the back there, in the blue.
No, we've got a mic right here.
Pardon me? I'm sorry, you got a mic right there. All right. Well, you can start off. Be loud.
Senator Sanders, thank you so much for being here and giving us an inspiration with your passion, your intelligence, and your facts about what we need to do about getting economic justice restored to our country. But my question, I don't mean to sound totally frivolous, but it is, I guess, but it's about taxpayers. Is there any movement in Congress to get the NFL and other organizations that are profit-making entities to pay taxes?
Yes. It's not just the NFL. It is 1 out of 4 major corporations in this country in a given year pays nothing in taxes. Okay, next question.
You're ready, Senator.
Yes.
So, Senator, you motivate and inspire a lot of people. A lot of people are wondering if and when you decide to run for president, will you run as an independent or as a Democrat, Senator?
That wasn't a loaded question, was it? Let me answer it this way. It is no secret. I would be less than honest to tell you that I've been coming to New Hampshire more than I ordinarily do. And the answer is yes, I'm thinking about running for president. Let me be really honest. I'm thinking about it, and let me tell you what, and I'll answer your question as well. But let me tell you what the concerns are. The agenda that I have mentioned, and by the way, I didn't talk enough about climate change, which is a huge issue that we're dealing with as well. I have, throughout my political life, taken on virtually every powerful special interest, you name it, market, we've taken them on, whether it's the energy companies, the drug companies, Wall Street, the military-industrial complex. And these people have unlimited resources. And what I do not want to do is run a campaign in which, you know, we're unable to mobilize people and we get beaten badly. That will serve nobody's purpose. I don't, believe me from the bottom of my heart, I would not wake up in the morning and say, oh boy, I've got to be president of the United States. They're all, you know, some of my friends in Washington do. And anyone who really wants to be president, in my view, is a little bit crazy because of the enormous problems facing this country. And you will know that no matter who is president, if you have the best president in the world, you know if that president was fighting for the middle class and working class, was taking on the big money interest 5 minutes after he or she was elected, you would have the Koch brothers and the other people bombarding the airwaves with lies and so forth and so on. So what I am, and the reason I am going around the country, I was in Iowa, I was in the South, I've been here, is to try to get a sense of whether or not, and you know, this is a tough issue, there really is a capability in this country, and I don't know that there is, of millions of people really willing to become actively involved, not only in a campaign, but let me tell you something else. I happen to respect and like Barack Obama. He's a friend of mine. And I would tell you that the biggest mistake that he made was that he was sufficiently maybe well-intentioned or naive not to understand that these Republicans, not from day one, they never wanted to sit down and negotiate. You know, I believe negotiation, compromise is part of the political process. You don't always get what you want. We did that in the Veterans Bill, believe me, I gave up more than I'm happy, but that's what you have to do, okay? But what ended up happening is literally the day that Obama was elected, inaugurated, these guys sat down and said, look, here's our strategy. We're gonna obstruct. We're going to make it as difficult as possible for this guy to accomplish anything, and then we'll go to the American people and say, nothing is happening. That's what their goal was. Now, what should he have done? What should any president who is serious about transforming our economy and our society do? The only thing you could do is make these right-wing Republicans an offer they can't refuse. And that is you mobilize people at the grassroots level, okay? You want to raise the minimum wage? We need 1 million low-wage workers coming to Washington, D.C., saying hello to the Republicans who are not going to vote for it. You want to make college affordable in America? Then you need the same thing to happen with young people. If 80% of young people do not vote, we will never be able to effectively address the high cost of college and student debt. End of discussion. We will not. So what I'm talking about is a political revolution. I started off by saying to you that the vast majority of the American people support virtually everything that I said. That's true. That's what the polls tell us. People want a jobs program. People want to raise the minimum wage. People want to deal with climate change. People believe in pay equity. They believe us. They don't believe right-wing Republicans. But the only way that we can be effective is when people are mobilized. And honestly, I don't know whether that can happen for a lot of reasons. And that's kind of what I am exploring. Because it's not just even winning the election. It's what happens the day after you win. And that means the only way that I know, I'm really thinking fairly radically here. I don't think you're going to transform the country by sitting down with John Boehner in a room in the Capitol. You transform the country and say, John, look outside the window there. There are 1 million people and they know how your guys are about to vote. They better not vote that way. That's the way we transform America. Now, your question. I am the longest serving independent in the history of the United States of America. And I'm proud of it. And I am not an independent because I think, oh, we got to be in the middle of the Democrats are here and the Republicans are there. No, I am an independent because right now the Republican Party is a right-wing extremist party owned by the Koch brothers and other billionaires, and the Democratic Party has become, in my view, much too conservative and not effectively representing working people. I've got to give you a little bit of credit saying that in this room, right? But I did, and that's what I believe, and that's why I am an independent. But this is what to answer your question, I haven't made that decision yet, but this I promise. Somebody asked me this early on. What I will never do is use my candidacy to elect some right-wing Republican. And the waste of you.
So you have a huge rally of people saying for climate change, and thousands of people come to Washington, and some of us have done that sort of thing before. How do you get the media to cover it? And how do you change things?
See, we're going to have a very long meeting tonight. Oh, I don't want to go into my favorite subject here. Give you an example of something. Everybody hear the question? The question is, we had 400,000 people in Washington last week. I was there, other people, and I'm very proud. You all know Bill McKibben is?
Yes.
Bill is from Ripton, Vermont. We are delighted. We're very proud of Bill. He helped organize that whole event. He's head of 350.org, doing a fantastic job. A year ago or so, there was a study. There's a group in Washington. It's called Media Matters. Many of you have heard of it. They're kind of a liberal media watchdog. And they came up with a study looking at the Sunday talk shows as to how much time has been devoted to what the scientific community considers the major crisis facing the planet. And it was pitiful. Pitiful. CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox, almost nothing. We wrote a letter. Some of us wrote a letter, and it actually has improved a little bit. But if you look at television, who sponsors a lot on television? If you notice the energy companies and our gas and coal and oil are going to save the day. Give you a worse example of media. A couple of weeks ago, we had on the floor of the Senate legislation that would move us toward a constitutional amendment to overturn citizens' rights. In my view, and in the view of people all over this country, perhaps the most important issue facing us. Do you know how much coverage that got? Virtually none. The New York Times, one of the better newspapers in America, did not think that it was worthy for one word on its news coverage. We had that debate for a week, almost no coverage. Which takes me to another issue. This is really an important issue. We have got to determine in our own hearts what the issues are facing the American people. CBS can't do it for you. Fox is not going to do it for you. And frankly, the New York Times is not going to do it for you. By and large, there's a lot more interest in issues about war than there is about the survival of the American working class. And we are right, and they are wrong. And one of the things that I notice as I go around the country is I ask people, what are the issues that they are concerned about? Don't you think, you tell me the last time you saw on television a program dealing with the reality that 20% of our young people are unemployed. See it? Nope. That 33% of African American kids are unemployed. See that program?
Nope.
See a program that 1 out of 4 corporations pays nothing in taxes? No, you didn't see that one either. So we have got to, and maybe the internet opens up that opportunity. But major point is, everything that I told you tonight, these are, I believe, the issues that are on the hearts of the American people, as is climate change. And we have just got to keep banging away and get the word out. We have a great website, there are a lot of great websites out there. Keep taking on the media and keep getting information out as best you can, because I'm afraid that the corporate media is not going to do it for us. Yes, ma'am.
Senator Sanders, thank you for being here. I've watched your career for a very long time, and I have nothing but admiration for you. So with that, I apologize for the question that I'm about to ask you, because it'll put you on the spot, and it will not endear me to some of the folks in this room. You mentioned briefly why you're not a Democrat.
Yes.
Can't help but notice you are an independent invited by the Strafford County Democratic Committee to come and speak to us. Speak to our party about how we can, obviously everybody in this room upholds those progressive values. We know what Elizabeth Warren is doing. We know what some of our other, Sherrod Brown out of Ohio.
Yes.
We have too few voices that will carry this fight and tell the American people the truth. And the fact is, we are where we are because we've been complicit. And it's time to take that on.
Okay, I agree with everything you said, but I didn't get the question.
The question, tell us what we need to do as a party. You've castigated Republicans for what they've done.
Okay, good question, fair question. Okay. In politics, on most of the issues that I talked about, economic issues, it's a very simple choice that people got to make. Which side are you on? Remember that Pete Seeger song? Which side are you on? That's what it is.
Yes.
Are you going to be on the side of the working class of this American country, which is struggling, or are you on the side of corporate America? Democratic Party has, in my view, kind of walked the tightrope on that. It was not George Bush, but it was Bill Clinton who gave us NAFTA.
Right.
It was Bill Clinton, and I'm not here, Bill Clinton's a friend of mine too. Hillary is too, so I'm not here to attack them. I've never run a negative ad in my life. I don't go around attacking people, but here's the point. I talked about the deregulation of Wall Street. You know who did that? Clinton. There wasn't George W. Bush, that was Clinton. And it's not an accident. You talk about, trade is a huge issue, and deregulation of Wall Street are two very, very important issues, and there are others. How does that happen? And the answer is, it's no great secret. And it's getting worse because of Citizens United. People need money. Where are you going to get the money? If you wanted to run for office,
I have and I do, so I know.
All right. Well, try something, I don't know what you've run for, but if you run for the United States Senate like Gene does, or anybody else, you need to raise a huge amount of money, because all kinds of money is coming in. All right, where are you going to get the money? $10 a piece? That's great. But it's a lot easier to go into a room and people are prepared to contribute, $10,000 or $20,000 to the party. And those people have interest as well. So I think the bottom line is nobody, I don't think you will tell me now, that if you go out around New Hampshire, that people say, yes, the Democratic Party is the party of the American working class. They would not say that. And the reason is that while the Democratic Party, and I caucused with the Democratic Party from the first day I was in Congress, doing some great things that you mentioned, two of the leaders, Elizabeth and Sherrod, great, and there are others, okay? But the Democratic Party is finally going to have to make a decision. Are they prepared to stand up to the big money interests? Let me tell you something. I believe, I may be wrong on this, but I believe the political climate in this country would be a hell of a lot different today if 2 weeks after Obama was elected president, he said, as FDR did, he said, these are the people who helped destroy our economy. They acted illegally, and I'm going to throw them in jail. I went to the White House with Maria Cantwell from Washington, Myron Dorgan of North Dakota, half a dozen people. We walked into the White House. And we said, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, the American people want to know. You know what this 2008 crash did? You know what it did. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings. Who were the bastards who caused this? Now, right now, you're all noticing, years later, these guys are forking over billions of dollars. Okay? It should have happened right then. Also, you're not offending me, so I'm going to throw it back, okay? Does anybody happen to remember who was the President of the United States before Barack Obama? I know we don't remember that. The Republicans are still running against a very decent guy named Jimmy Carter. The truth of the matter is that history will record, and I know Bush a little bit, not well. He's a nice guy. He should never have been president of the United States. He was a nice man. His wife was a very good first lady. But this guy, in terms of the economy, in terms of the war in Iraq, in terms of Wall Street, a total unmitigated disaster.
Halliburton.
Where was the Halliburton, you name it. Where was the Democratic Party saying, running against George W. Bush? Am I missing something? Okay. So bottom line there is you have to make it clear the American people are not stupid. And they're going around and they say, look, Republicans are completely nuts, we know that. But the Democrats, where are they coming from? And certainly there is not enthusiasm, that we know. All right. So that's how I would answer. I think I am being ushered off the, somebody comes up, I got my cue. Listen. let me, again, thank you all very much for the work that you do. You are doing exactly what has to be done at the grassroots level. Thank you all very much for coming.
Let's give a big round of applause. A couple of years ago, I was asked to speak at the Georgia Democratic Party dinner, and just before they introduced me, they had Congressman John Lewis speak. I feel a little bit like that right now. Listen, we all heard some great amount of information from Senator Sanders, and what we need to do is take that information and use it as a tool. Because if we don't use that as a tool, the people out there aren't going to know. 2010 wasn't because the Republicans had a great year, it's because Democrats didn't go out to vote. You need 1,000 Democratic voters in Strafford County alone. 10,000 Democratic voters in Strafford County didn't show up at the polls in 2010. That lost us Carol Shea Porter. That lost us Jackie Silly. That lost us Martha Fuller Clark. It lost us the Democratic majority in the House and the Senate and our Executive Council. It almost lost us the governorship. We have to make sure those people hear your message. You have to make sure they hear the message. It's not enough to have television ads going on 24/7. It's you talking to your neighbor. It's you talking to your friends. It's you talking to your relatives and making sure everybody who's eligible to vote gets out and votes. If we do that, we're going to have a terrific November. 2010 wasn't such a good year in New Hampshire and not in Maine, but it was a great year in Vermont. It was a great year in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island and New York and Maryland and Delaware and on through the East Coast. They got off their butts and got their vote out. It's up to you. Strafford County alone can make the difference in the U.S. Senate race. Strafford County alone can make the difference whether Carol Shea Porter goes back to Congress for a 4th term. Strafford County can make the difference on whether we have the majority on the Executive Council, whether we have the majority in the State Senate or in the House. It is up to you. Some of you may have come because you thought it would be a good time to listen to Senator Sanders, but it does not do any good if you don't go out and talk to the people of Strafford County and make sure they understand what's at stake. What is at stake at this election? It is our future, our state's future. The impact of your votes in 2014 in Strafford County can affect who's on the U.S. Supreme Court, can impact generations in this country. Get up and go to work. This was a great night, and we've got a lot of people to say hello to, but this is really about, we've got 6 weeks to do it. If we do it, we will win, and we're going to have a great time. Listen, I'm not going to talk about any of the Republicans running for office. You have to turn on TV, you can see all the commercials, you can see how bad they are. But Jeanne Shaheen has shown up every single day for the last 5.5 years in the United States Senate, and she's been the best damn U.S. Senator New Hampshire has ever sent. Maggie Hassan was elected governor and had to clean up the mess of those two Tea Party years, and you know what? She delivered. She delivered a bipartisan budget. I never in my life imagined that those Republicans would roll up their sleeves and get to work. She passed a bipartisan budget unanimously out of that Republican state Senate, working with and funded the needed projects. Medicaid expansion. I told her staff would just stop trying to get those Republicans to come to the table. Just let it go. We'll beat them in November, next November. And you know what? Maggie Hassan didn't listen to me, thankfully. She rolled up her sleeves and she worked with those Republicans, and they voted for Medicaid expansion. Because of that, 50,000 people in New Hampshire will now be eligible to have health coverage. That is something that we should be very, very proud of. When they talk about the economy, New Hampshire's unemployment is 2 full points below the national average. We have a lot to be proud of in what we've done in state government. And Carol Shea Porter, for the love of God, if I have to come here from Manchester and tell you how great she is, it's all over with. Do we love Carol Shea Porter or what? But then if I see on election night the same results that I saw in 2010, I'm not going to be one happy person sitting in Manchester, and you sure as hell shouldn't be seeing me for a couple of years. Because if you guys turn out, she will go back to Congress, and we won't have you-know-who in there again. Strafford County is perfectly positioned to have the impact. You've got a phenomenal executive councilor in Colin Van Oster, and you've got to make sure that he gets re-elected. This is not an easy district. This is a Republican district. He got elected in 2012. You got to make sure that the votes out of Strafford County make sure that they take up for all those Republican towns. The Bedford, where you leave Bedford with the 5,000 or 6,000 vote deficit. You make sure that the people in the town of Barrington and Lee check off Chris Pappas and don't leave a single ballot empty. And in the North Country, look it, we didn't get enough Democrats out in the special election. But those Democrats in Middleton, and New Durham can make up the difference this time, and we can make sure that Mike Cryans goes to the executive council. Can you imagine if we have 4 executive councilors? The things that we can do? Can you imagine if we had none? You know, Medicaid expansion would have been stopped in its tracks if we didn't have the Democratic majority in the executive council. Chris Sununu and, I can't even think of his name, up in the North Country. They voted no. Can you imagine voting no? They did. Planned Parenthood, on and on and on. Executive council is critically important. You know, I've known David Waters for 20, 30 years. When he was elected to the state senate, I had great hopes. He's done a phenomenal job. You make sure he's got a good vote coming out of here, because he deserves to go back to the state senate. And we came close in 2012, but Rich Leonard is going to be sworn in at the next Senator. He'll do it if you work hard. He'll do it if you put up the signs, if you give the money, and you do everything that is necessary. And he will be a wonderful, wonderful state senator. And of course, our very own Senator Martha Fuller Clark, progressive leader. Vice chair of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, by the way. I also want to acknowledge that in the room we've got 4 former state senators. There may be more. There's a lot of people. Former state senator Jackie Seeley, we all heard from her earlier. Former state senator Bert Cohen, a little to her left. Bert was grumbling that Bernie was too conservative for him. He didn't start singing "O National" and what is going on here? Always have hope, Bert. Our phenomenal former senator from Durham, Amanda Merrill. Where's Mandy? And Catherine Wells Wheeler. Katie Wheeler. Everyone who's currently a sitting member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, just stand up. Sitting members, stand up right now. Sitting members, stand up. Everyone who's running for state rep, stand up with them. Everyone who used to be a state rep, stand up with them. Everyone in the room should be standing with them. Let's give them a big round of applause. We can't let Bill O'Brien take back this house. Running for speaker, folks, you can make the difference by making sure every single one of these Democrats win in November. It is critically important. I assume Rosemary's not here, Rosemary Rogers. Is today her 90th birthday?
87.
Bert, you told me the wrong year. It was Jack. No. Well, I was shocked because I really thought she was about 67 because I served with her in the House and she has got a lot of spunk. I'm so glad that she won that primary last month.
She was out canvassing door to door.
She's out canvassing. Phenomenal. Well, that's great, because she's going to, it'll be great to have her back in the House again. I do want to acknowledge, I know there are county candidates for office here, but there's one that everyone in the state is paying particular attention to, and that's the sheriff's race.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sheriff Du Bois is he here?
Yes.
Where?
Yes.
Was? Well, anyways, the point is, if you think you know Jerry DeLemus, we all do too, all around the state. I can't say anything that I don't want in the press, so I'm not going to say anything about Jerry DeLemus. So, otherwise, get out and vote, make sure that the sheriff is re-elected, elect the Democrats to the other county offices. It's critically important for you to have a functioning and positive government. You've seen what the Republicans put up for office. For whether they say up to the 9/12ers, the Tea Partiers, you know, they held a press conference when they were at the birthers, and I couldn't control myself at that point. I can now, but I couldn't. And I said I couldn't understand. The press asked me, what did I think of their press conference that Susan DeLemus and the group had. I said I really couldn't understand them. I wasn't wearing my tinfoil hat. People in Washington were not happy with my humor. I do want to mention, because there's such a huge crowd here. In just a matter of weeks, on October 16th, the New Hampshire Democratic Party's annual JJ event is happening in Manchester at the Radisson Hotel, and tickets can be purchased at nhdp.org/JJ. And we have President Clinton coming. We already have sold 600, exactly 600, Colin. 600, so you sold one where you're sitting here at the table? Okay. Bert, you bought a ticket? He's sponsored. Oh, let's think. Folks, it's going to be a great night. It is going to be important that we have a huge turnout so we can show the voters that there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for our ticket. Obviously, the governor, the senator, both congresswomen, our leaders will all be there. We're expecting a huge turnout. I think it's something that's going to be very special. This is a historic election. Never before in New Hampshire history have incumbent Democrats held all 4 top positions in the state, and never before in American history have they all been women. Let's celebrate great.